Hello and welcome to a new series, what will probably be a 10-part series, breaking down nine series and then going through our overall ranking at the end of Inside Number Nine. Now, I'm sure most of you finding this video who've never watched this channel before are coming because you know this show. It does have a pretty dedicated cult following. If you so happen to be a fan of the channel or someone who knows us or is like, what's Inside Number Nine? This has randomly come in my recommended. To give it a brief synopsis, Inside Number Nine is an anthology show written by and starring Reece Shearsmith and Steve Pemberton, who have a background in mostly comedy before this. Though The League of Gentlemen and Psychoville both had their horror elements, they were primarily comedies. And this kind of gets marketed as a dark comedy anthology, but I've always thought that kind of boxes it in a way that when you actually watch the show, the genre does change basically almost every episode, which makes it very exciting. There's a lot of rules to this show. Every episode happens in house number nine, flat number nine, trailer number nine, you know. Almost every episode stars both Reece Shearsmith and Steve Pemberton. There's a couple in this first season where one of the two don't appear, and we'll get to that. And there's always a hair that appears, a sort of hair statue, which Andrew, you might have to look out for and spot in future episodes. There's
I
plenty
didn't
of
notice.
running, yeah, there's plenty of running jokes, Easter eggs, and they will become especially important when we get to the final couple seasons. But for now, we are at the show's roots. We are ranking every episode of series one. I am a big fan. Andrew has never seen this show before. So, but I must add, you will know this if you've watched our 90s video so far, is an anthology show expert. Would you agree?
I'm definitely a fan of anthology shows, that's for sure. But I hadn't gotten around to this one, and it wasn't a tough sell though with that in mind. So I was happy to give this one a shot.
Now, since you're the wild card, I'll go first with my number six. So there's six episodes in each series, all 30 minutes each, which is very British and it's very concise, which is nice. My number six is The Harrowing, the final episode of series one. This was not a rule that carried on throughout the show, but typically for the first five series, roughly, the final episode of each series would be the most genre horror episode. Now, this one is definitely more in the realm of horror comedy, which I think is its biggest flaw. I mean, I love Helen McCrory. I think she's a great actress, but her and Reece Shearsmith's performances in this are very over the top. And then you have the two teen protagonists who I don't really care for. There's a lot of jokes about like, oh, vampires not knowing what broadband is. It's like I don't know. It's I think the concept is fairly interesting, but it does in execution feel a lot like a Saturday afternoon kids show rather than ironically the one that's most horror based is the least tense and the least atmospheric in the season in my opinion. Perhaps except for one other one. For me, the biggest saving grace is the music in this episode. I think this is my favorite score of the whole series one. The mandolin, sort of chaotic mandolin near the end is really cool. And of course, there's like John Carpenter-esque synth hits are really cool as well. But yeah, this is probably in my bottom five, bottom 10 maybe of the entire show. I don't think it's bad. I just think it's pretty underwhelming and kind of shows some of the teething issues they had early on where, you know, maybe the ideas aren't fleshed out to the extent they could have been. So for me, The Harrowing's a 5 out of 10. I also catalogued the IMDb ranking of each episode. So of the 55 episodes, this one ranks 51st on IMDb. So it's not particularly well thought of. That's my number six.
Yeah, I guess it falls in the tradition of anthology shows, and there's always going to be a spectrum of quality, um, just by the virtue that it's not a continuing narrative. Um, I did look at the IMDb scores, but not until after I watched. So I wanted to go into at least this first season with to see, where my thoughts would land in comparison to what the consensus seems to be. Um, I do have a different number six. I'm going with the understudy, and yeah, this episode was a bit meh for me. Just didn't interest me as much as the others. As the title suggests, it's about an understudy and his rise to becoming a star. You got envy, crime, desire, ambition, all kind of complicating matters along the way. I think part of it is I don't find the theater setting as relatable to me as like all the other ones are pretty much like domestic more. Um, and I think the script probably could have been a bit tighter. Um, it was a bit dry, lacking in the humor of maybe some of the better episodes of the season. Um, Maybe there could have been a bit more of a novel element to the twist because there are some pretty good twists elsewhere. This one didn't really do that too much to me. Um, so it's my last, but there's another one that I kind of have around in that same range that I'll be talking about next. That's my number six, The Understudy.
What score would you give that out of 10 out of interest?
I'd probably put it around a 5 out of 10 as well. It's mediocre. It's not terrible. I I watched it and you know it passed the half hour nicely enough, but it's not probably something that I'd need to see again.
That's fair. Um, I don't think that one's that well regarded either. Those sort of last three episodes of the first series are not the most memorable ones for the fan base, let's say. I guess that's the other thing to mention that I forgot with the rules is that every episode has a twist. They're sort of twist in the tail little goodies. That's kind of the thing that Steve and Reese really go for. My number five, talk about a different episode again, is Last Gasp, which I have as a 6 out of 10. I think this one's decent. It's 49 of 55 on the IMDb ranking, so again, not particularly high. I think where my issues with this one land are that it is probably one of, if not the most openly absurd concepts the show has ever engaged in. And it feels like there's a real tonal imbalance where they don't lean enough into the comedy. But there's some really good moments of dark comedy in here, which I do like. So a pop star during a visit to a sick child takes his last breath into a balloon, which then becomes the object of great importance and becomes this like lucrative item. I think the best aspect of the episode is like the commentary on the absurdity of celebrity culture. I just think the episode's really slow and the writing isn't very sharp. Um, I also really do like actually the parent characters played by Steve Pemberton, the dad, of course. Um, I think of the two actors, Pemberton has the more range, but I think Shearsmith, we'll see more later on, can bring this real delicate emotion that Pemberton maybe can't. Pemberton's better in the bigger, louder moments, but Shearsmith has this sort of quiet quality as well. They're both great actors, I've got to say. Um, and what I liked was that the mother character is sort of fulfilling her own fantasy, this sort of like really dark idea to engage with, which I really enjoyed. Pemberton's hilarious in this. The when he's threatening to pop the balloon, it's really funny. Um, the twist that he's alive does give it a bit of a bolt of energy towards the end. And the line that made me laugh the most was, and it's Pemberton's delivery one of the things like, "No offense, that's one of the most offensive things I've ever heard in my life." Because it's just something you say. You're just like, oh, no offense, and then you say something horrendous, and it's I don't know. I thought that was the delivery of the line really worked for me. Um, but yeah, there's something lacking here. It's another episode that feels very much like an early idea that they had before they really got in the groove of writing these anthology episodes. There's some good stuff there, but I'm not fully on board, even though I liked a few moments and a few elements. So it's six, it's decent, but it's not going to be one that I revisit. I hadn't seen these last two episodes since first watching it, so I can kind of see why. But again, like you said, nothing bad, just kind of passes the half hour. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So for my number five, it's one you've already spoken about. It's the harrowing show's first venture into like the gothic horror, and being like a horror guy, I had high hopes. This one, like you have the young house sitter called to the old mansion, has all the genre trappings, creepy paintings, like the cryptic owners, and then the secrets upstairs. Invites her friends over to see what's behind this mystery. I think in terms of the basic elements, this would be something up my alley, but there's potential that I don't think is really delivered on too much. Probably would have liked the plot to continue a bit more from where we're left off. And there was probably too much of the runtime spent just kind of slowly wandering around the house. Um, so I felt like we didn't get as much of a payoff to, where it's building towards. But to that ending, excellent makeup there. I thought that really um, made it uh, gave a lot of promise for what they could have done with it, but they spend too much time on the lead up and not enough on the delivery for me. And
Yeah,
I'd probably also go a 5 out of 10 for this one.
yeah, I think that's fair. I think I that's one thing I did mention is that the pacing of that one is really slow in the middle. Like the beginning and the end, pretty decent setup, pretty good payoff. The middle is just a slog. It's just like walking from room to room. But yeah, my number four is the first ever episode, Sardines, which is the 20th out of 55 on IMDb. Kind of surprised me because I've always thought of this one as like a solid enough intro to the concept of the show, but episode two is what really hooked me in, not episode one. So, but you've got an all-star cast of British comedians here, particularly Catherine Parkinson, most known for the IT Crowd, and Tim Key, who is probably one of my favorite comedians. It's about a game of sardines played in this sort of like team building activity style in a big mansion. It really relies a lot on cringe comedy, which is going to rub some people the wrong way, and I think it did some people. I knew a lot of people who just watched the first episode and were like, "Ah, I don't like it." I was like, "Oh, carry on, carry on." But I enjoy cringe comedy. There are moments that are like skin crawlingly awkward, and I think what the best aspect of this episode for me is the twist because it really establishes, okay, this is a show that's going to do something unexpected because basically for the whole episode you got this little hint of like maybe Steve Pemberton's character was sexually abused, but then you realize that's a red herring, and then the ending is so dark, so dark. I really like Timothy West's cameo at the end as well. Very memorable and fun as the sort of patriarch of the family. But yeah, for me, the second episode is where you get the big statement. The first episode is more sort of settling into the groove, getting to know Reese and Steve's writing style. Yeah, it's good. 7 out of 10. I enjoy it, but it's not one of my favorites. I was quite surprised it's in like that upper third of episodes on the ranking.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with everything you said there. It's also my number four, Sardines, my introduction to the series. Taking the chamber genre to the max, not just in one room, but mostly inside a wardrobe. Um, and yeah, like the title suggests, a bunch of people attending a party, playing the sardines game, gradually hiding together. You got the banter, the romantic tension, and some kind of unspoken secrets over a family history there. Definitely establishes like the dark comedy, quirky characters, and of course the twist ending that goes quite hard. um, I like the simplicity of this one. I feel like the twist is really good. Maybe uh, I was just missing some of the subtext early on. If I felt like it kind of develops a lot in like the last third, maybe I would have liked a little bit more a bit earlier, in place of maybe some of like the cringe jokes and stuff. But It's a pretty good episode. I'd probably also have it around a 7. Um, so yeah, so like a solid introduction of the series, but I think it's clear that there is better to offer from having seen the rest of the season.
Yeah, I think they were too focused on the red herring and making you believe that that's where it was going, and then sort of yeah, that's even on rewatch. I was like, yeah, they could have seeded that a bit better, but it works. It works because you can imagine that that character's purposely making himself boring and annoying so that no one pays attention to him, and yeah,
Right.
get them all in the wardrobe all at once. Yeah. My number three might be a tad controversial. I don't know. It's still in my top half. It's Tom and Jerry, the third episode. It's the ninth ranked episode of the entire show. And it probably has one of the more infamous twists in the show's in the show's history. We're talking about dark twist. This is a whole different. This feels like even more brutal. The thing that struck me the most about this episode is, even though these were all filmed around the same time, Reece Smith looks really young in this episode, but not towards the end, but near the start. Kind of looks like he did in the 2000s when he was doing this sketch comedy stuff. There's a really I love their sort of twisted sense of humor when he's trying to give Mig when Mig comes to the door and he tries to give him the money, but he doesn't have change. It's really good. But yeah, it's about a homeless man who sort of gradually takes over this guy's life and lives in his house and all this stuff. There's again a big red herring misdirection here where you're sort of meant to believe because you never see the two of them in the same room with somebody else that you assume that Mig, the homeless man, is the representation of his mental sort of instability, let's say, and his depression, when it's actually his girlfriend Jerry, who is the sort of voice in his head. I f- I do really like this episode, but I find the messaging a little bit puzzling. And I almost think it's the rare thing where the extra twist at the end kind of undoes a lot of, what was established. Because I guess spoilers, at the end it's revealed that Mig, the homeless man, like we said, is real, and that Reece Shearsmith's character, who I can't remember his name, but he's drowned him in the bath. Tom, that's the name of the episode. Tom.
Oh,
He's
yeah.
he's he's drowned him in the bath, and I mean, I do think the nonchalant. That's just Mig. He's not real, and then he just leaves. That's great. How nonchalant he is about it is perfect. But I don't know if you'll agree when you get to talking about it. I almost think it's just an extra twist that you didn't quite need just to shock people, where you already had a really effective portrayal of grief and depression that was so powerful. And I almost think the twist could have been both Jerry and Mig were in his head rather than just Jerry. I really like Conleth Hill's appearance in this. Varys, of course, from Game of Thrones. Really funny. Really one of the more memorable one-off characters from this series. And yeah, I think it could have been an even stronger episode had they not gone for that extra twist. But I still really like it. It's an 8 out of 10 for me. It wouldn't be in my top 10, but it's in IMDb's top 10. So make of that what you will.
Now I'm starting to get a bit nervous that I put one of your favorites at the bottom there. But I'll be talking about number 3. That is Last Gasp. And from what I could tell, this seems to be one of the less appreciated episodes in the series. And I think I would disagree with that. I quite enjoyed this one. We get right into it, like with the Make-A-Wish visit, not going according to plan when the famous musician kind of dies. Like they think he did anyways, blowing the balloon, and then the parties involved kind of ponder exploiting his last breath for profit. Lots of commentary, as you said, on like celebrity greed, um, celebrity and greed. For me, the main amusement was kind of seeing like basically like this Twilight Zone morality tale on human nature, but applied to something like so trivial as like a balloon. Um, So maybe coming from that background, it's something that I really appreciated, not knowing kind of what this series is supposed to be yet. So it's early enough on that I can just appreciate it as maybe a one-off stylistically, but I had a good time with it. I enjoyed the humor of it, like with the mom, like caring way more about the singer than the little girl did. So stuff like that is lots of nice like character touches involved, and yeah, I don't know if it's going to be normal that they kind of have an ending that isn't so much a twist, just kind of like the problem that they're fighting over basically is out of their hands now, the balloon flying off in the sky. But I thought it fit pretty much the story here where like nobody gets what they wanted. I'd probably go a 7 out of 10 for this one because like it's still like a fairly like lightweight story. Um, but I had a good time with it while it was on.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, another thing I was going to bring up, I didn't mention it with Sardines, but usually the opening episode of each series is the ensemble with where they get a lot of British comedians in to sort of flesh out the cast and do something a bit bigger in scope. There's also tends to be one episode in each season. I'm going to start calling them seasons because then it gets confusing between season and series. I know British viewers might not like that, but I'm going to do that from now on. There's always one episode per season that I think gets underrated. You've also agreed by putting Last Gasp higher than most people would. My pick is The Understudy, which is my number two. I'm still only at an 8. I don't think it's a masterpiece or anything, but it's ranked 50th of 55 episodes on IMDb, which I think is crazy. Um, I'm a big Macbeth fan. I've spent a lot of time, well, a few years of my life working in theatre. I still work at theatre. So maybe that does have an element to do with it. But I also think best performance of this season, Steve Pemberton in this episode. He is fantastic. And again, it's a very showy, very loud performance. It's not very subtle, but he does it so well. In fact, I think it's a really strong ensemble. All the performances are really good. I really like Rosie Cavaliero as well as the assistant. That's a pretty neat little twist because again, you set up thinking it's going to be one thing, and then she kind of, if you've been paying attention, you'll notice. But yeah, it's cool. And that ending is really eerie when she's like, I did this for you, and it's like, wow, wow, okay. I can understand why this one isn't universally loved. The positive qualities are quite niche. And I wouldn't say it's like the most crazy twist or like the most thrilling story, but I like the 5 act structure. I enjoy the characters. I enjoy the setting. I do think it's quite sinister and it's almost like a cautionary tale. And Pemberton's performance again at the end when he's in the wheelchair, wow, that was, showing a completely different character almost. And it's really tragic. Um, yeah, it's it's underrated, I think. Really good episode. Again, not one that would be in maybe my top 15 episodes, but maybe my top 20, top 25. We'll see when we get through all of them. But yeah, really like it. The understudy.
I do agree with you. He did do Steve Pemberton's role. Very good character. I probably would have liked the episode more if you had more of him, even because after the first 2 acts, you kind of we only see him at that one other part, right? But yeah, maybe it'll grow on me. Who knows? My number two is another one you already mentioned, which probably means we're gonna have the same number one. I have Tom and Jerry. Um, And at this stage in watching the series, because this was number three, I didn't even realize until the next one that the same guys had appeared in all of them. And they do a good job, really, especially in those first three, drastically altering like their roles and their appearances so that I wasn't necessarily able to tell. I think this was the most tense episode of the season. um, Touches on like the terror of like a parasitic relationship between like this peculiar, like unkempt guy off the street and the man who lives in the apartment nearby. beginning with the returned wallet, little by little, the guest starts to take over basically his benefactor's life and supersede him. There are signs partway through that signal to where you think this might be going, but there is the double twist at the end that you mentioned, and I liked the double twist. I also would have liked it if neither were real. Um, but I can see your point that maybe it undercuts a bit, kind of like his journey. That the one who is basically causing like his personal downfall is the one who is just like the real guy. But I still enjoyed like the reveal at the end there in the tub, and I thought it was just a really good, tense episode. And hopefully there are more kind of in that style because that's definitely an angle of this series that I really appreciated here.
Yeah, you'll get
I'd
plenty more of that.
probably I'd probably go an 8 out of 10 for this one.
So you got pretty good scores on your top three. Nice.
Yeah,
So our joint number one, no surprises here. 10 out of 10 for me. A Quiet Night In, which is the number two ranked episode on IMDb of the whole series. And it's probably the second most iconic as well. We'll get to the most iconic episode. And I think this was kind of a proof of concept. You have your gimmick here, which is that it's almost entirely silent, apart from, EastEnders episode and the dialogue right at the end. Um, it's a home invasion. Uh, it's part Quentin Tarantino. It's part 40s classic Hollywood. It's part Marx Brothers. It is so enjoyable in how it takes these elements from all these different eras of cinema and just kind of throws them into a ball, this like half hour of delirious comic fun. I think it's arguably the funniest episode they ever did, arguably the most inventive episode they ever did. Again, there's plenty of competition for both of those things, but I have a lot of nostalgia with this one as well because it was the one that really hooked me on the show. The use of music is fantastic in this episode, and it has to be when you've got no dialogue. But between the classical music, the brilliant uses of "Without You" by Harry Nilsson, the original score as well is great. There's a bit of Wallace and Gromit in here as well. I feel like there's a bit of I know this came before it, but the episode of Barry, Ronnie, Lily kind of reminds me of that as well. It's almost comical in how the two people that the houses that they're raiding, how archetypal they are. That he's blasting classical music and she's like reading a magazine and watching EastEnders, this soap opera. I think that the only thing that I would say you could hold against it is that there's a couple times where you really have to suspend your disbelief of like, how have they not seen them? Like as they're hiding around the house. But it kind of adds to the absurdity, I guess. I like that the art piece is literally a blank canvas. That's a great added bit of commentary. You got that really brutal POV pepper spray shot, which I love. The location is gorgeous, really, really unique and cool. There's the whole thing that Una Chaplin is Charlie Chaplin's distant relative, and she's got a role in the episode, which is cool. Okay, the transgender joke has not aged particularly well, but the fact that they then follow that up with Smith's character ending up on a sex doll under the bed with a penis is it kind of makes it worth it because that really got me. Even having seen it before when he has to, yeah, you know the bit I mean.
oh yeah.
Um, and yeah, it just how it escalates how far in over their heads they are. And then you get Paul, the cleaning guy at the end, the two items for £10. It's one of my favorite jokes because it just completely like deflates the tension. It's great. Such a dense half hour full of surprises and great gags. And it's the early high watermark for the show. I think it's fantastic.
Nice. Yeah, so we share the same number one, as you said, nearly entirely without dialogue. As we get like this attempted art theft, mostly from the point of view of the burglars, almost cartoon-like, almost like in that almost everything that can go wrong does, and yet they have so many close calls that they're able to avert suspicion or being caught earlier. Um, more people in the house than bargained for, surprise animals, so many of these near misses. Definitely the funniest episode of the season. I think the one time that really got me laughing out loud was just the dog with the closed panel. I don't know. Slapstick humor will always get to me at its best. So it's one of those stories where like all the competing motives between the characters collide, and then it's like a fitting final note. I think not everyone, I would say, gets what they deserve, but there's a karmic twist that you know ends it on just the right note with the toilet paper or the paper towel in place of the actual art. Fun episode, works great in the half-hour format. I think a movie of this type would probably be exhausting if it was just like, nonstop action, but at this length, it's just right. I'd probably go a 9, and maybe there'll be something that even tops this for me later on. We'll see.
Well, that's what we're hoping for. That's what we're hoping for. So your what would you say is your reflection on the first season of Inside Number Nine?
Like I was saying, it's kind of like I expect with just about any anthology show that it's going to be a bit hit and miss in terms of like the highs and lows of the season. Even with just 6 episodes, there's quite a spread between them, but that's also a compliment in that it's kind of following the footsteps of all like those classic ones as well. Um, Reminds me actually like there's a Twilight Zone component, but also an Alfred Hitchcock Presents, especially with the way they use the humor um, mixed with like the macabre. And I'm curious to see if that's something that I can expect going forward. I'm guessing it is. Um, I enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to seeing what happens next.
Nice. I guess I can. I won't get too into detail about where I think this season ranks compared to the later ones, but let's just say I think it's one of the more uneven seasons. I think there are more consistent seasons to come, without being specific. But you still got Quiet Night In, which I think is one of the best episodes they ever did. So yeah, rankings were mostly similar. We had a curveball each, basically. Let us know how you'd rank the first series. If you've not seen it, go watch Quiet Night In at least. That's a great time. And yeah, I'll be getting back to my TV archive watching, and maybe in a few weeks we'll get to episode 2 of this series. It's a nicer one to sort of get out quickly, easy watch, 3 hours, and then you've done all your watching.
Yeah.
Series 2, some interesting episodes there to get to, and I'm intrigued to see how we line up or don't there. So thank you very much for watching, and hopefully we will catch you soon.